What's going on, everybody? You've got the card board coach here with your boy, Coach Co. And team, today we've got a very special guest on the podcast here today. We have John, aka Basketball Card Guy. How you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you. I'm sure listeners are happy to have you. And just based on some of our other interactions, I think it's gonna be a great one. Man. First of all, I think the first time we formally chatted was at Topps Rip Night.
Hmm.
And then I had the pleasure of chatting with you a little bit more extensively at the Philly Card Show. I feel
Yep.
like we've been like bumping into each other everywhere.
Every other weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Sure enough, you'll be in Toronto and I'll bump into you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk to me. What brought you to Topps Hobby Rip Night
Yeah.
and the Philly Card Show?
Sure. Well,
Yeah,
Hobby Rip Night were my buddies over at Skybox. They are my LCS as much as people see me across the country, different places. They started their shop about 4 years ago, I think now, 3 or 4 years ago, across the street from my office,
really.
literally across the street from my office. And I got to tell you, man, it was good for their business. It was bad for my wallet. Like every lunch break, and I hope my wife doesn't watch this, but every lunch break, I had a nice hour I usually give myself for lunch. Like that's something I've always kind of had in place. Like you need to wind down, you need to so you can come back strong for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I grab a quick bite and then spend a good 45 minutes hanging out at their shop, looking through singles, seeing what's new, chatting with the guys. And so I have a great relationship with them. I've known them since they first opened the business. I've been very supportive. I've helped them with some video graphics and things, over the years, and their backdrops that were actually at the Hobby Rip Night, all of those I did for them, that kind of stuff. I'm very involved with a lot of the graphic kind of and video things. And so when they decided that they were going to do this event at Citi Field a couple of months before it happened, I was literally the first person to RSVP. I'm like, I'm there, I'm supporting it. It sounds amazing. I was like, it's going to be a big undertaking because they're going to have an event an hour away from their shop.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize that when they hear about the event, that was literally an hour outside of where their shop is based. And as somebody who also has a background in doing events and doing things within music and ticketing and all those kinds of things, it's a big ask to get your core audience that's maybe, used to being about 15 minutes away from your shop to now travel an hour to
Yep.
go somewhere. But I was supportive from the start, and I said, like, I love this idea. I love the fact that it's connected to Citi Field. I love that you're realizing that the last Hobby Rip Night, which I was at their first one that they did too, they had tents set up in the parking lot, and that's how they were able to deal with the amount of crowds they had. Well, as you're landing in March, that's not, it's that time of year where you're not really going to have necessarily great weather to be
Yeah.
doing, this kind of stuff in February and March that you did, at the end of fall or the beginning of fall before. So, it was awesome, to be a part of that. And I got tipped off a little bit early, as I know you did as well, to who was going to be there at the event after Fanatics decided that this is cool. They got a big venue. It's close to an airport in New York
Yeah.
City. And so, to lend them a great athlete for it. But yeah, that's why I was there. I helped them do a lot of the display stuff. They're friends of mine. I brought my whole family out, which was a real treat as well. And it was just a fun time. It was exactly what it was supposed to be at that event.
I love that. When Al told me that was your LCS, I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah. He's been coming here for years. And I was like, what are the chances? That is awesome. And your
Yeah.
daughter ended up getting a signed ball from Tom
She
Brady.
did. It's back behind me right now. It's going to be on display in our. We're actually creating a family game room in the house, so it's going to be a prominent display. But for right now, it's above my size 32 Shaq shoe. That's why the ball looks so tiny. Um, but but she did. She got that sign, and my son made the first trade with Tom that night, which was amazing too. I mean, like for him, he's such a nice kid, and he loves the idea of trading, and it just was. I mean, what a dream come true. I mean, you were there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just an amazing thing. And that's what I love about the most about that event. And I think, hearing what Tom said behind the scenes too, that's what he loves the most about the
Yeah.
event. It is coming out and being able to interact with these people, make a memory. I'm a firm believer, and I talked to some of the folks at Fanatics about this. I talked to a news reporter about this too, but I'm a firm believer that all of this exists in the Fanatics, ecosystem right now, because the people that are working there making the decisions were us when we were younger, and none of this existed. There is no way you could have met Tom Brady at something like this and trade cards with him or get an autograph. No, there's no way. Any of my
Yeah.
favorite athletes, like, it was a rarity. Like, they would show up at one show a year, maybe. I remember meeting Dennis Rodman in the 90s, and that was like during the height of the Bulls. And I was like, this is so incredible. But that was like the only story I have. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't do it. They weren't accessible.
Yeah.
And stuff like this, where you didn't even have to pay to get in, and you could meet someone like that. And all across the country, if you were Bleecker Trading in LA, you're meeting James Harden, you could meet Kevin Durant, you could meet all sorts of these folks throughout. And I just think that
Acuna was an option too. You know what I mean? And he was the MVP last year. Like, so it's not even like it's
big
like just
names,
retired. It's not even like just retired players either, right? Like we're
right?
talking about like multiple sports. Like it's pretty crazy.
It is. And I think that just drives more interest, right? And it wasn't like the pressury thing of like, I think, look, nothing wrong with signings. I go to plenty of them. I pay for autographs all the time. But there's something that's nice about an athlete showing up for an event who's there. Tom must have signed 70, 80 autographs. I
And he
mean,
said he wasn't signing anything.
right. Or they
Yeah.
said he wasn't going to sign
Yeah.
anything, at
Yeah.
least,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, but when he came out,
Yeah.
more than happy. He threw it out there. You guys want
Yeah.
some autographs? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's special. If you can allow the athlete's personality to come out and let them be themselves and do what they want to do, it just helps everybody's brand. I think, and I have some experiences with this, in recent memory too, that we could get into, but I think sometimes it's just the fact that people that are in these companies are too afraid to make the ask. I think that they hold back. I think that they're worried about what someone will think if they ask to do it. Like, what will Tom Brady think if we ask him to sign autographs when he's charging $2,000 an autograph to do
Yeah.
signings? He'll probably say no. Well, you know what? Why don't you just ask? Like, yeah, and I think that that's a lot of it. That's always my mentality, is like, have a conversation, at least bring it up. It
Yeah.
can be a no pressure conversation, but give the man an option,
Yeah.
because clearly he wanted to do it.
Yeah, and there's no way that I mean I'm sure that he's kind of getting paid like just I don't know if it's like a per appearance kind of situation or just like a maybe a percentage or whatever the case may be, but whatever the deal is seems to be working because he's like he's available. I mean, there was also a video circulating of Michael Rubin at Cards HQ where he like FaceTime Tom Brady and like it just
He
seems to be like a
FaceTimes Tom Brady all the time,
that's what
man,
I
by the
mean.
way.
It just seems to be like a regular like
I was at the
wherever
National.
whenever.
I was at the National this past year, and so I do branding for Roadshow Cards. So I'm their head of branding, and we put on, the largest trade night ever there last year. And we actually presented Michael Rubin with a pair of shoes that had my trade night logo that I designed on them. And he said, look, I'm going to wear these tomorrow. Like, I'm going to wear these around the show. I love these. Sure enough, the next day he's wearing them around the show. I run into them during the show and I'm like, hey, I actually designed those. Is there any way I designed the logo on those? Is there any way I can get a photo of that? And he's like, sure. So I take a photo of the shoe and him and stuff like that. And just then he gets a FaceTime call from Tom Brady.
That's
And so he
crazy.
waved to my son and I, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, he just gets FaceTimes all the time from him. But it's
So that,
crazy,
that
man.
wasn't your first face to face with Tom Brady then.
No, I had a FaceTime with him before. It's unbelievable.
That's
Unbelievable.
unreal. Well, you mentioned previously, like as we were just chatting, some of your other ventures and how that kind of like overlaps some of what we're talking about right now. Like, do you want to dive into that a little bit I mean,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
and for
So
everyone else to know?
yeah, so I've owned a video production company for over 20 years now. I've done graphic design, all that kind of graphic work and stuff as well. It's only recently that I brought that into the hobby. And I think it came about mostly because I was working as an advisor to a company called Knox. I was their advisor, and they called me their chief collector. What they were looking for was somebody that would just be a pure collector who's been in the hobby because he wants to be in the hobby and could give opinions based on what a hobbyist would want in this platform that was being built, a collecting platform to track your collections and things like that. We ended up selling that company to Beckett a few years ago. And along with that, um, they needed videos and stuff done for that. They were looking out for video production companies. And then who was the CEO at the time of Knox was like, wait a minute, don't you have a video production company? He's like, would your company be willing to do some of this stuff? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've never kind of combined the two before, but of course, like I
Hmm.
can, we could do it. We can make it work. And so I did some videos for the product, and also I ended up doing the just giant video displays for Beckett at the National a couple of years ago. That they had these giant 20-foot by 10-foot tall screens, and so I did all the programming on these video walls. And that was my first entree into bringing what I did outside in the regular world, in the real world, whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah,
non-hobby
yeah,
world, you
yeah.
know, into the hobby. And then at the same time, I was doing branding and design for Roadshow. I did video work for Piece of the Game, who's a great brand as well in terms of hobby shops. I did a whole video tour of theirs that got integrated into their display. There's a beautiful display also at the National that year. And then
Dave's a good guy.
he's a great
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that whole thing kind of spun out. So Josh Luber, who was the head of trading cards for Fanatics at the time when they were launching all of their new stuff, there's a lot of conversation about what was going to happen there. He went to the National and he was on a podcast, and they asked him, what would you call out in terms of your favorite things that you saw throughout the entire National? Um, and he pulled out Roadshow cards and Piece of the Game as displays, as places. He's like, they're stores that are becoming big brands. He goes, someone there is doing big branding for them and getting this to be much bigger than just a single store. And the podcast folks were like, well, the connection between the two of those is John, the basketball card guy. Like, he was the only thing that connects those two brands together, and he worked on both. And so I think that was a point as well where like people started putting those pieces together and realizing, there is somebody behind the scenes pulling some strings, making some things happen, putting the brands in place and really elevating that aspect. And so, that's what I became known for in this zone. Arena Club approached me, asked me if I could do a video before their brand launched at the Dallas show because they weren't going to be able to set up that particular weekend. They wanted to have it on screen. So I did that for them. After doing that, they invited me to their launch, which happened at Yankee Stadium with Derek Jeter, who's a partial owner in the company. So I went out for that. And then they re-engaged me to do a kind of remote trading day where Derek Jeter was doing trades with folks utilizing the platform across the country, legit trades that you can do for free on the platform. Like literally, I have a card in my showroom, their virtual space. You
Yeah.
have a card in yours. Let's trade. And so I did some video work around that. Did some things for them leading up to the National as well. And so it was yet another piece of where bringing in that video graphics and kind of just my creative juices to that project. So been doing a lot of things like that throughout. I built some logos for people and stuff like that too. And then some consulting in between too. Again, coming back to the roots of I've had this since I was a kid. I have a picture here actually. Like
I'll see
this
it.
is my first retail job, right? So that's me in Mount Kisco Cards and Collectibles back in the day, Mount Kisco, New York, Westchester County. I
I
was
love
14
that.
years old, night manager at that store. And some of the products are more fun to look at than just seeing young me.
Yeah, that's wild.
Like reminiscing on some of the stuff that's there. Look, the hockey helm. Look at those.
Yeah.
But, but it was really, that's where I've been collecting since I was probably 8 or 9. And that job was my first like real job. I had other jobs and things that I was doing, but like that was my first like hourly pay job, which by the way, I didn't end up with any pay. It all went into cards. I mean,
Always,
let's be
always.
real, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
and I just really I enjoyed that aspect. I went off to college. In college, I was building websites in the late 90s, and I built some websites for card shops that were surrounding school and stuff like that. I came back and I just continued to collect. I did my own repacks, 1998, 99. Repacks have existed a long time. I know people were talking about who invented them in the last two
Yeah, yeah, I
years.
know, I know.
They've been here for decades. But I used to have these black boxes with stickers. I had all sorts of different ways. I did a team set bag with two of those like Magic the Gathering like deck things that like would
Yeah.
black out the back of the card. So I
Yeah.
sandwiched cards in there with those so you couldn't tell what it was. But I ran those $12 a piece. They had an autograph in every pack back in 1998, 99 at flea markets, and they always sold out, and people enjoyed them. And so I had a lot of that. I joined eBay in 1998, and was early there as well. And have been on that platform since. Obviously, it ended up being, one of the world's top marketplaces for
Yeah, no
cards.
kidding.
Yeah, but I still remember back prior to PayPal, like I had to mail money orders across the country to get
That's
cards. Like,
crazy.
think about how far we've come.
Yeah, I
Like
know,
I
I
had to go
know.
to the post office to get a money order, ship it to somebody before they would ship me the card I bought. I like the whole world has changed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy. So like talk to me about like that transition, right? Like how does it feel? I mean, obviously you were dabbling, like not dabbling, but you were involved in the market in some capacity, but you had like a set, it was like separate. It was like home and work basic or
yeah,
yeah, it's like home and work basically, right? Like how does it feel
yeah.
now over the course of the last few years, after one opportunity and another opportunity and then slowly like I don't know what percentage of your business now is like hobby related stuff versus outside stuff, but it
Yeah.
sounds like it's become a lot more hobby related things. How does it feel to mix like your real job with your passion?
It's great. It's great, but I'm always very cautious because the hobby for me has always been a hobby and will always remain a hobby first. I always say hobby first every time I'm doing stuff. Anytime I think about doing stuff within the hobby, it's about like what would be good for the hobby and what's good for my own, mentality, my own being sane in this. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of us see the hobby as an escape. And the one thing I worried about and why I didn't introduce it earlier that I do all this stuff and could apply it to the hobby is I didn't want to take away the one thing that I enjoy doing outside of work that is my escape from work. If I bring too much work in to my hobby, it's not going to be a hobby anymore, and so I'm
Yeah.
very careful about that. The one great thing about this over some of the other work that I've done in the past is I've been able to draw a line and say, I'm only going to work with people I want to work with. If it doesn't resonate with me, if things aren't working out, or if I don't feel like I'm making an impact in a particular location, I'm not going to do that work anymore. It is not for a paycheck.
Yeah.
My primary and anything within the hobby here is I feel like I can make a difference that's positive, and so I go into that, in that way. And if I don't feel like I can make a difference, I'm very honest about it,
Yeah.
So I think that's the core. I don't want to ruin my fun in the one area that's been fun for me my entire life by bringing too much work into it.
Yeah, I get that for sure. And I kind of like I feel the same way when it comes to like buying and selling. And especially there's been like pressures to buy and sell, and especially I mean you see some of these like people and some of the deals that they're dropping, and there's like a lot of the content for that was pushed through the algorithm for a good chunk of time was like flipping related stuff or
Yeah.
buying and selling stuff. And I was like, I can't do that like even remotely close to on like a full-time basis because I think it's just gonna ruin it for me. Like I I'm comfortable buying and selling things like for me, and we can talk about, for you as well and what that looks like. But like I have obviously PC items, but then I like to prospect. Like I like to, especially when it comes to hockey. I love the release schedule. So when hockey players, when their cards debut, I usually think that there's like 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 years before they actually pop off. And so
Sure.
it's kind of like Bowman, where I can see the guy get drafted and he plays in junior and whatever. He's like 18 years
Place
old.
your bets. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And
Yeah.
I can buy low on these guys. And, realistically, they're probably not going to hit their prime for like another 3, 4, 5 years. And so I can just kind of sit on these things. And then eventually when, the right circumstances come into play, I'm like, you know what? I feel really good about the fact that like I was right on this. And then I sell and I can either use that to buy another player or to to
Yeah.
to buy into my PC, right? My biggest thing is like I want to continue to grow my collection and maybe diversify whatever the case may be, but I don't want it to be like a money pit either. Like I don't want to just be just putting money into it constantly because I think if I can have a nice little balance. It's like a reward for being right, and at the same time, I'm just going to continue to acquire things I actually really want. So, that being said, what does your like buying, selling, trading, like you told me earlier you don't grade, and I really want to jump into
Yeah,
that. But
sure. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk a little bit about your like hobby
Yeah.
experience.
So I decided, maybe at the worst possible time, but I decided right before COVID happened that I was not going to put any more money into the hobby. I had enough in it. I had a ton of cards. And instead, if I wanted something new, I had to get rid of something. One of my good friends, he keeps his collection in a shoebox, which is insane because I can
Wild.
never, I mean, you can see behind, I can never like
Yeah.
fathom like getting to that level. Um, but the notion was like, okay, let me not keep accumulating because I have like close to 500,000 cards. Like I don't need this, like it's too many. I'm hoarding at this point.
Yeah.
So let me step back a little bit and say there are things here I could get rid of. Like if I have 8 Damian Lillard autographs, do I need 8? Could I live with 7? Or 6?
Yeah.
And so maybe take out the most valuable one. Maybe it's not the most valuable to me, but the market says it's the most valuable. Great. Let me put that aside, sell that one. And then maybe there's one that I just like the least, and it doesn't matter where the market is on it. If I had to pick, one out of those 8 to get rid of, that would be the one. Great. Okay, let me pull that one out too. And that's been my mentality for the last few years, starting before COVID and on. So I haven't put any fresh money into the hobby since before COVID. I'm operating off of that. Now, to my luck, a lot of the stuff that I bought years and years ago has gone up so much that
Yeah.
it's opened up that I haven't had to sell too much to fund the new purchases that I want to make.
Yeah.
And trading I do all the time. I love that. So it's a little bit different aspect there because most people are putting money in when they feel like this thing is growing. And I could see it growing years ago, but I had told myself already and my wife, I was like, look, I'm not going to throw more money into this.
Yeah.
It's like we have kids. There's all these aspects that it's just like, I got to be responsible.
Yeah.
And you got enough in it already. Like in my position, I had plenty that was already in that I could start to recycle that and get enjoyment of placing the cards that I had into other people's collections. I always call it the card story. Like, I don't want the card story to end where I bought it at a show and now it's sitting in a safe for the next 40 years. Like it's kind
Yeah.
of boring. Instead, I look to see like, are there other collectors making a set? There was one guy that approached me for a game jersey card, an upper deck game jersey 97 when they first came out in basketball of Tony Kukoc that I had gotten in a trade back in 97. Like right when it was out of the pack, I traded somebody in that store I was working in for the card. And it was the only 90s bull that I could afford in that set. Jordan was the only other one you could get.
Yeah.
So like I held on to it for years and it was important to me. But someone came to me and said, "Hey, I would love to purchase this from you. And not just to have it, but I want to get it signed by Kukoc and put it in my set that I'm trying to build of the entire set signed." And I was like, what? Like these cards were 1 in 2,500 packs. They're extremely valuable to begin with. And you're going to go out and get them all signed? I'm like, when are you starting? He goes, I already started. I have Allen Iverson already. I've got this guy. I've got that guy. So he sent me photos. He's like, look at the. And I said, you know what? Again, card story wise, way more interesting if Tony Kukoc gets to sign this card and it goes into a set where this guy is trying to do the impossible task of building this whole thing out than it's sitting in a safe, you know? And so I gave it to him at a super reasonable price. Someone else approached me afterwards and was like, what did he pay for that? I told him, he goes, oh, I would have given you triple that. And I said, yeah, but I wouldn't have sold it to you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand the point. It wasn't coming out of my collection just because I was like, because I want to sell it. I need to sell it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. And so a lot of my decisions are made based on those things. Like I want people at its purest to get the joy that I've gotten out of having the cards when they have them too, and that's just part of it.
I kind of love that, man. It's not kind of love that. I really love that. That's awesome. And so, again, like, how do you? I mean, I love that mentality, and it's a very different mentality than how a lot of people started, especially if they started during the boom, or that's when they really started to
Yeah.
pick up. So, how have you seen things differ?
Yeah.
Um, in the last 4 or 5 years versus like stuff that you kind of grew up on, and what can we
Sure.
do to kind of like right this ship?
Well, a lot of it's motivations, right? So I have the exact opposite motivation of what most people have. And I totally understand why they have a different motivation too. You know, if you look at it, I'm playing with the house's money basically. It was already established at the point at which we look at what I'm letting go of at this point. Um, so there's not that same pressure of I just put in 4 grand into this card, and if it goes down, I'm going to lose money. I need to flip it quick. Like, and that's what I see at a lot of these shows. I see younger people than me going around with cases of cards where their lowest value card is like 3 or 4 grand, and they've got up to 30, 40, $50,000 cards in that case. I can only imagine what kind of that financial pressure that puts on people who've invested that much money in what they're walking around with. So I think it's a different world in those respects. Um, in terms of the base card world, I was one of the very first 4 years ago when this whole Luca thing was happening, and go back to I have a video on YouTube that I was explaining to people as it was, like, crossing over the $500 and $600 threshold for Gem Mint 10s that, "Guys, put on the brakes. This is way too expensive already," you know? Um, I I always knew how rare cards were, you know? I lived through the '90s insert era where some inserts were 1 in 12 packs and others were 1 in 2,500, you know, and you knew when you saw a truly rare item. And that got skewed a lot in this, and I think folks like me and others that collected back then had a really big advantage over people that didn't know that. You know, I think back to, like, Kobe's rookies. You know, for the longest time before he passed away, his average rookie, his tops rookie was a $5 card raw. $5, you know? I had 50 of them probably, you know, and that got totally skewed after he passed, and it wasn't immediately after he passed, but, like, a few months after,
Yeah.
those things got shot up on eBay. I think that's the single biggest problem that we have today, is that it's very easy to manipulate market value, I put that in air quotes, but we used to have Beckett Magazine as kind of our, you know, our anchor point on
Yeah.
values. You could disagree with it, you could say it's a little off here or there, but at least you knew in relation in a set, you could look at 2 rookies and understand one is twice as much as the other, you
Yeah.
know, or had a kind of a roundabout number. I'd say that the biggest thing people might have said about them that was true in the past was they were slow to update value because it only
Yeah.
came out once a month. I
Well, that's
get
what I
it.
mean. Yeah, yeah. So there wasn't like the same volatility that there is today,
No.
right? Where like a baseball player plays 30 or like 28 times in a month. Do you know what I mean? And his value is probably going to change like
And
every
but
game,
should it,
you know?
right?
Like,
Like,
yeah,
that's really the big debate, and I don't think it should, that's my opinion. I
I
I
don't.
feel like that they have one great the same thing, a basketball player has a 50-point game, and all of a sudden his cards double in value overnight. No, come on. Like, why is this happening? You know, and but it happens over and over again. It's like people are just itching to be able to sell and get that money out so they can put it in something else and have more fun again.
Yeah.
The I would say the biggest difference today to bring all of that together is that I see more people today having fun flipping the cards, taking one card, getting out of it, and getting into another one. Whereas I saw people 20 years ago in my generation of collecting having more fun by getting that card and keeping it.
Yeah.
Like, you had a pride in owning that card.
Yeah.
You wanted it bad, and now you have it, and it's like a medal of honor that you don't want to let go of, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's the core difference if I had to, like, boil it down into something really simple.
I wonder if like society has a little bit to do with it too, because there's just like this grandiose like feeling of FOMO constantly, right? Like with social media and
Yeah.
someone's always doing something you're not. And like they
Yes.
could have been doing it before, but you would have no idea. You know what I mean? Like
Right?
maybe you call your friend on the home phone and they don't answer and you're like, "Oh, I wonder what Jimmy's doing." You know, like
Yeah.
and like but like you don't see Jimmy posting on Instagram all the crazy stuff he's doing. But now but now
I
like
see it all.
Jimmy didn't answer me, but I see Jimmy's at the club, right? Like, like, and so,
Yeah.
tie that back into sports cards. It's like a lot of people kind of want to get it on the ground floor for some of these things, I think. And,
Yeah.
they almost want like the next LeBron James. They want the next
That's the
Kobe,
prospecting you
right?
talked about.
That's
That's
it,
the
right?
exciting part.
They want to be the on the ground floor for this stuff. And so, when some of these guys have like a crazy game, they're like perfect. Like this is my brain telling me that like, yeah, this is like I'm reaffirming that I'm getting in at the right time. And
Yes.
conveniently enough, like buying in after a huge performance is probably the worst time to buy.
Oh, it totally is. It totally, especially now with the way the market is, because it will bump up like that. Um, yeah, no, I agree. I think it's unfortunate that it's gotten that way, but there is this immediacy that people expect, and there are other areas of alternative investment that, like crypto being the biggest, that and NFTs for a time, that people see that and then want to apply that here, and I think that that's it's tough. It's tough because we don't know all the facts. The difference between a card and an NFT is that on every NFT that you see, you know exactly how, as far as I know, you know exactly how many they made. And, and they have that all back to the blockchain. So you can see, like, this is an edition of 50.
Yeah.
That's it. We only have that on a very small subset of cards today where we know how many are serial numbered and made to make
And even
judgments
even
on
then
them.
they could be mis-serial numbered, or I mean we've seen multiple superfractors, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, three,
like
right?
like
One, yeah, it's a three
and
of
like
one.
and we've seen
Sweet.
and we've seen negative serial numbers. So like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sub-zero refractors. Yeah.
It's true. I I think I mean, what I always tell people when they get, like, really upset about something in the hobby is I'm like, "You gotta understand where this all started, though." Like, these were pieces of cardboard that had no value.
Yeah.
When this was all created, they had no dollar value. They were not being traded for money. Like, if
Yeah.
you go back to that, you realize, like, it's amazing how much value is put on them today. As my mom always says, "They're pieces of cardboard. I can't." They're minting money there. My
Yeah,
mom always
yeah.
says, and
Yeah.
she's right. They are. They're effectively doing that. They're creating dollar values, and with all of the bounties that are being put out now, which are just strategic for distributors or for card stores that have a lot of the wax. I mean, you do the math on it, you go, okay, that makes sense. They can afford $500,000 because they're going to sell $4 million of the product.
But
Like,
it also kind of disrupts the market, right? Because you're like, okay, well, if that card's $500,000, then like, what is
right.
that card worth now? You know what I mean? Or like,
And
what
people make
should
those
this card be
associations.
worth? Yeah,
Yeah, and people will make those associations, making that assumption. Like, I remember the $500,000 that was being given for the Zion National Treasures, and
yeah,
people going, "Well, what's Ja worth? Is he 250?" And it's like, no, he's not. He's worth whatever the market would say he's worth. But someone's standing there promising 500,000 for Zion. So my opinion was, like, they don't have to be related at all.
Ooh, I like that.
Because the
Yeah,
person promising the 500,000 for the Zion is giving people the golden ticket only on that one and promising that money only on that one. But their motivation is because they've got cases and cases and cases of this product that they're ready to sell at a margin that is at like 1,000%. That's what a lot
yeah,
of people also didn't realize, that National Treasure boxes that year in basketball, if you got it from a distributor in the first round, they were $400 a box, selling for $4,000 a
yeah.
box. So if you had enough of that stacked, like the people offering the bounties did, you could offer 500,000. It barely touches what you're making in profit off of selling all those boxes, and so again, I would disconnect them. Most people didn't, because people want to figure out what the value is, and it's a comp world now, and everyone needs a comp before they can think for themselves. No one can go with emotion anymore and go, "Would I rather have the card or the money?" Okay, that's the point at which that's what it's worth. Like, I'm willing to pay this money for it, for me to have it in my collection. That should be the real value. But now everyone's like looking, well, what do other people pay on a similar thing that's not exactly the same? You know?
It's funny. I got it not into a spat or anything, but like I remember I was in Atlanta and I was trying to move I had a Kobe rookie, Topps Chrome PSA 9,
Nice.
minimal greening. Like it was
Yep.
like I've seen
Oh yeah, a lot of them green
maybe
bad. Yep.
150 copies. And
Yep.
this one, I would say, from the ones I've seen, was like top 20,
Sure.
which is like
Maybe a
pretty,
little
it's
bit
like,
on the arm, a little bit
yeah,
on the
just
leg.
a
That's it.
tiny bit, but
Yeah.
like everything was crispy. And I was walking around and I was like, if I get a good deal on this thing, like I have no problem trading. Like realistically, I wanted to kind of trade something. I was like, I don't really need the money, but like I want to see if there's anything
Yeah.
I. And I brought it to a few tables, and they're starting to comp it, and they were comping, and I'm like, okay, but you're comping, and the one that happened to sell, like one of the few ones that
All
sold
green.
recently, all green, like I mean all green, different color card, and they were like, oh, okay, well this is the value, and I was like, okay, but there's a distinct difference between like this one and this one though. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like trying to have this conversation. Like, well, we can't really comp based on that. And I was like, well, that's interesting because like, and like I get it. Like I understand, right? Like I guess if it's
To a
just like
point, you do, but
if it's just like
reality
churn,
is you
if it's just
don't.
like
Yeah,
churn and burn, right? Like obviously
yeah,
you're not the end consumer here for this then,
yeah,
right? Like I mean, because like you don't really appreciate the fact that this isn't green. And like maybe you
yeah.
haven't seen enough of these copies to see like how nice this one is, right? Like and I think it was like one of the first times where I had like this perspective that like not all comps are created equal.
They aren't.
Um,
Not all graded cards are either.
that's exactly it, right? And so I was like, interesting. And so I ended up like holding it, and eventually I made a deal for a piece that is probably never going to leave my collection. Truthfully, I ended up trading
Awesome.
it to Sign and Slab. So it's funny we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Um, for a Austin Matthews hockey player. I don't know if you know who that is.
I've heard the name before, but
There
I
you
wouldn't
go. That's
recognize him out of
okay.
a
Yeah,
lineup.
he's
Yeah.
so but he's from he plays for the Leafs, which is like my hometown, and it was an autographed debut ticket, and it was ironically enough, it's a market that I'd never been a part of, but like just holding that, and I'm like, I have like so many feelings about this item that like I brought myself back to the moment where I was watching the TV and like it's his debut, and I was like, I want this so badly, but
That's all, and that's the right kind of trade to make.
yeah,
That's an emotional trade. It's something like, I mean, it sounds insane with the amount of cards that I have, but I'm totally fine never getting rid of any of them, never selling any of them. The amount of money I paid for them or what I traded for them, I'm totally fine keeping them for life. And as a collector, that's a great mentality to have. As somebody that has put money in as an investment, you can't have that mentality.
yeah,
Like you can't. If you're going at it with the idea that I'm putting money in here, so I'll be able to recoup more than that in the future, then that would be at odds with that mentality.
So how
But
do you
yeah,
feel about like people calling them investments then?
I think it's fine. Look, teach their own. I say the same thing about when someone buys a card. Some people get really upset if someone buys a card from you and then they turn around and they sell it an
Yeah,
hour later.
yeah,
A friend sent me a post the other day where he's like, "This is just sick." Someone posted something on their IG of this awesome, awesome autograph card that they got. And then literally an hour later, they're like, "Well, it only lasted half an hour." And gone. And it's like, do you have no emotion over any of this stuff? Like, but to each his own. That's fine. I had people for a while during COVID because I'm not a grading guy. Like, I sold all my cards raw. And now there's kind of this connotation where people say, like, oh, well, raw it must be a grading reject, is what a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
people think.
You chose
So
not to
many,
grade it.
yeah, I just chose not
Yeah,
to. I've had it for forever and a half.
yeah,
So a lot of people went to my website, they bought the cards, they graded them, and they were getting Gem Mint 10, 9.5 at Beckett, all these things. And a lot of folks were um, kind of wary about telling me this. And finally, I made a post at one point, and I'm like, hey, I want to celebrate the wins with you. Like, if you guys buy a card from me and then you grade it, like, just because I didn't grade it doesn't mean you shouldn't. Like, you could
yeah,
totally grade it.
yeah,
So people started sending me stuff. They're like, I hope it's okay. Like those Kobe's that I had, right? I sold most of those Tops Kobe's for like $40, you know, raw.
yeah,
People, mine gemmed, mine's a 9. Mine's like, I keep getting like, I felt bad about saying it to you because that's like a $500 card now. It's $1,000 card now. And I only paid you $40 for it. And I'm like, it's totally fine. I got exactly what I wanted to out of
yeah,
it.
yeah. I was into this for $5. You know what I
It's
mean?
totally
Like,
fine. Yeah,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
dude, like
yeah,
it's fine.
yeah,
I had a guy that bought my only 2 Luka Doncic prisms from me at a show. I sold them to him for $20 each. They were raw. He graded them. They both gemmed, and then he turned around and he sold them for $5.50 each, I think, at the time. He was again wary about telling me, and I'm like, dude, I paid 50 cents each for them on eBay, like several months back. It doesn't matter. Like I felt like raw, they were worth $20 because Jason Tatum was worth $20 at that point, and I felt
yeah.
like he was the big rookie from that other year. Luka's the big rookie for this year. To me, it felt okay, and I was into them for 50 cents. I mean, like, what does it matter? So I
I
think
love
there's a
that.
lot of that where
I
we
I
can
love
be
that.
honest and upfront with each other in those situations and celebrate them together. Um, I don't think we need to feel like just because you made more money than I did on that card that I sold you, like you shouldn't be embarrassed about that. That's great. That's great. And hopefully you come back and you buy some other ones that I'm willing to get rid of. Like it's totally fine.
John,
So
I love
yeah,
this mentality, man. It's
yeah,
true. And then like I mean there is like a lot of pocket watching, right? Like there's like I don't know,
It's
like
FOMO
people.
on the other side.
Yes,
It,
yes,
it's
yes.
this, this. I need every piece of meat off the bone. Oh no, how did that guy get more money than I did out of this? Who cares? You got what you wanted.
I
Like,
agree, man. And that's like,
yeah,
once I sell a card, I'm never checking that value again. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that's just how I operate. Like you
yeah,
won't see me being like, oh man, I really missed the top on this one. Like if I sold it, it's because I wanted to get rid of it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I made a
yeah.
decision that like this thing no longer serves me, or like I'm willing to take a loss on this, or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, it's gone now. Doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Don't think twice about it. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that like some of these decisions might haunt people, and I don't know why, but like you're
They
right.
think about it too much. It's that every piece of meat off the bone mentality that's the one thing I'd advise people to get away from that. Don't feel like you need to do that. Like this is a time where you can let go of stuff. Actually, honestly, a good friend of both of ours, Al, had that mentality back when on singles. He didn't used to sell singles. He thought that if he sold the single, somebody else was going to make an extra 20% on it. And that bothered him at the time. He
Yeah,
got over it and he's selling a ton of singles now. And the
yeah,
business is doing great off of that. And the store looks better than ever.
yeah.
But even he had that issue in the beginning where it was just like, but what if someone gets more? What does it matter, man? You open the packs,
That's
like
exactly it.
you've got all this inventory in it. It took them a while to get that. And I think a lot of people, if they don't think about it to the end, if they don't understand that that capital that you're selling those cards for can go into something else that makes you that much more, if that's what you want to do, right?
Preach,
Yeah.
preach. I mean, you need liquidity, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not like sometimes you take a loss in order to take it like a W. Like how long do you plan on sitting with that thing and just like you hate it, like especially if you bought something that like you weren't personally attached to, and you're like, oh man, I'm just every day you're stressing about this thing. It's not even worth it anymore. You
Yep.
owning that and stressing every day is not worth it. I promise.
Yeah. Seriously, man. And look again, like I come at this with a hobby mentality, and it's not that this is not linked to like me paying my
Of
mortgage or any of that
course.
kind of stuff. My collection is not linked to that.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's just a much better play if you're gonna have it as a hobby. If it's gonna be something that brings you joy, man, why would you want to stress yourself out with that kind of stuff? Like,
I
not
couldn't
worth
agree.
it.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
John, I want to thank you so much for jumping on here. Before we get
Ooh,
going, though, I
yeah.
want you to plug the living shit out of whatever you want because I'm sure after this conversation, there's a lot of people that want to get to know you even more, especially with like your mentality and some of the things you've been involved with. So please, John,
Totally, man.
the
Oh,
floor is
totally, man. No, I
yours.
appreciate that. I'm on Instagram at basketball card guy. Pretty simple, straightforward. And I have a website, same name, basketballcardguy.com. Very easily to remember. They can reach out to me either way if they want to chat about anything. If they need help with something, I help people every day. They're looking to value things, or they're thinking about a trade. They're not sure if they should do something. All that kind of stuff. I give free advice all the time. And if they're looking for, help with branding or any of those kinds of things too, I take on a select few clients. So like, don't be upset if I'm like, I'm too busy right now to do it. But you can always pitch something. You can always reach out and shout out for that. But those two are the best. My website, I'm actually starting to put more cards on. I hadn't for like almost a year. But I just put about 200 singles up on the website this past week. So basketballcardguy.com, you can check that out, as well as I have stuff on there that's just in my PC that you'll see on the site. It's the one Shopify site that you'll visit that half the items don't have prices and you can't buy them.
I love that.
So it's like it's a fun way there because people are always asking, curious about my collection beyond what they
Yeah.
see on Instagram. So a lot of things are available on there too.
I love that, John. John, thank you so much for jumping on here. And man, I learned a lot, and hopefully others did as well. Not only about you, but just how the mentality can shift and has shifted, and perhaps might hopefully shift back as more
I
people
think it will.
continue to get stabilized in the space. But team, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Cardboard Coach featuring John, the basketball card guy. I know I did. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. Coach Co and John are out of here. Peace.